This video is sponsored by Skillshare. Hello everyone! Elaine has left to see her parents. She'll be back in a couple of days, but what that means is that I have nobody to shoot B-roll, and I'm absolutely not doing it myself. Seriously, when I filmed B-roll, I had like one trick where I would drag the camera on a cardboard box in a sweeping arc across the table and then stabilize it in post. So, how to make video? First of all, can't review a board game without B-roll. What is this? No pun included, circa 2015. Second, can't fill the gaps in between where I forgot what the script is. Also, I'm not Patrick Stewart. I can't memorize 3,000 words and then recite them in one go. There is only one thing left, which is to follow in the grand tradition of serialized television and produce, drumroll please, a clip show! That's right, today we'll discuss various subjects like why I review board games, the history of MPI, and I'll list some of my more favorite and less favorite videos that I've made over the years. And to make it a lot more exciting, I'll spill all the juicy, hidden information I've learned about this industry over the years. Just kidding, Asmodee, your secret is safe with me. For now. I don't meet a lot of people out there in the urban wilds of Nottingham. Most of my interactions with strangers come from casual chit-chat with fellow dog walkers in the park. God, I miss coffee shops. And strangers don't tend to get very personal, unless they're a bit strange. Most of the time, they just ask me, "So, what do you do?" Here's the thing. If you're watching this, you're probably into board games. Unless you aren't, in which case, hello, I'm Efka. I review board games for a living. I left some cool videos for you to start your journey if you click the eye at the top. But by all means, please do keep watching if you're into self-indulgent introspection. Anyway, you're probably into board games, and whilst you might not exactly want my job, some of you would probably be quite happy to work in board games. Dog walkers in the park? Not quite the same audience demographic. I started doing this little dance whenever I hear that question. I do the dance because I know how it's all gonna play out, but there's a slight chance that it might not if I obfuscate things enough and if they're not inclined to pry. So first they say, I work in video production. And then they do pry because video production sounds exciting. They ask me, oh, what kind of video production? And then I say, oh, well, I'm a YouTuber. And they go, ooh, what is your channel about? Board games. Look, we find board games exciting, but the average person out there, they would probably have the same reaction if I told them I volunteer at the local abattoir. A mix of bewilderment, put on politeness, with a touch of disgust. Which makes this a weirder job than you might think. It's cool in isolation when we're at a convention or at a board game night, but out there? In the Nottingham wilds? And honestly, that suits me just fine. I always wanted a weird job. I guess I'm what you would call a late bloomer. Here is just a taster of the various occupations I dabbled in before I settled on no pun included. I was an English teacher, a computer salesman, a light bulb salesman, a radio news anchor, a Christmas tree farmer. I spent exactly one day working in a warehouse, spent exactly one day working in a call center, and I worked in Legoland, which is evil, by the way, and I even translated, let's call them romance novels? Thankfully, none of my work was ever published because I never completed a single book, because I guess I'm just too much of a prude. Plus, MPI has the benefit of working for yourself, and considering my disdain for authority, well, let's just say this works. The only boss I have to hate now is me. Which is where some of you would say, wait a minute, aren't you supposed to tell us that you review board games because you love board games? Well, here's a tasty soundbite that I'm sure is not gonna get clipped out of context The truth is that I don't love board games. Let me explain. First of all, the benefit of being a YouTuber is that I can make videos about whatever the heck I want. And most other subjects would probably provide me with a more comfortable living. The reason I'm telling you that is because I want you to know that I chose to review board games because it is something I always wanted to do and still do, but not out of love. Love is a strong word. I really, really, really like playing board games. Some of the best times in my life have been spent playing board games with friends. They're an indelible part of me. But I like other things too. Films, traveling, cooking, video games, role-playing games. Do I like them as much as board games? Probably about the same, but I'd say that literature and music are more important to me. My friends are more important to me. My dog is more important to me. My mom is more important to me. And certainly Elaine is more important to me. So I guess that makes board games joint best 7 thing in my life. Not bad, but maybe not love. When NPI began, I was honestly just looking for something in my life that I could build. I was playing a lot of tabletop games at the time, and thanks to folks like SUSD, the media field was beginning to become very creative, and that appealed to me. I had a creative writing degree and I wanted to put it to good use. So I just started. I say history, what I mean is history from my perspective. NPI is equal parts me and Elaine, and she's not here, so... oh, whatever, let's just do some sweet revisionism. I think I could easily group all of NPI videos into 3 distinct time groups. First up, it's the early years. And boy, watching these videos back is not uncomfortable at all. They look perfect to me. There's a reason most of these are unlisted. Let me just come out and say it. We had no idea what we were doing. I don't mean that in like a faux self-deprecating way. Just no clue whatsoever. I got this crappy Canon camcorder camera, second-hand I might add, and I didn't even think about shelling out for a DSLR, despite them being, even all the way back in 2013, significantly better cameras than camcorders, with a negligible price difference. Didn't even bother getting a microphone for the camera. And when I did, I just mounted it on top of the camera as if that was going to be fine. I haven't worked out how white balancing worked all the way until 2018, until someone explained it to me at UK Games Expo. Thanks, Jamie. I was not at all aware of B-roll, but I abhorred jump cuts, so anytime we wanted to cut, we had to change camera angles. We shot everything chronologically, so we never filmed scenes with the same angle in bulk, so whenever we did change scenes, we had to just move the microphone and the camera and the lights back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And when we wanted to highlight elements of the game, we just physically panned a handheld camera. Truly, we were pros. Also, I say chronologically, but for that to be true, we would have had to have scripts. And scripts are just for people who can't keep it all in their heads, right? And I did keep it all in my head, along with a bunch of ADHD. Basically, we just played a game a bunch of times and then went, right, let's film this. What a mess. We were idiots. I should say, I was an idiot. Elaine's not here to defend herself. She was also an idiot. 2 of the 3 most viewed videos on our channel are from that period, that being the Gloomhaven video and the Scythe video. The 3rd video has a lot of views because it has H-Bomber Guy in it. That's basically the trick to YouTube. You just put H-Bomber Guy in your video and you have a lot of views. You should probably put H-Bomber Guy in this video as well, because I have some leftover footage from that. So here it comes. See? Instant stardom. Anyway, I'm kind of sad about that actually, because I don't think those videos are very good. In terms of critique, I think the side video is pretty solid, but Gloomhaven, I was just gushing and I should have been a bit more critical. Also, structurally, they're all over the place. They do have good bits in them though. There used to be this fad on British television where they did documentaries about people who really shouldn't have documentaries made about them. Like, this person has only eaten chips in 10 years, or this person hasn't thrown anything away in the 90s. We tried to spoof that in the Gloomhaven video, and I think that sketch would hold up if those documentaries were still a thing. Now it just seems a bit weird. I really like the Eastern Europe location shots in the side video too. We filmed them in my favorite place in the whole world, Nida. And yes, I did fly to Lithuania just to film those, which seems preposterous now, but I can guarantee that as soon as it's safer to travel, I'm going to be doing impractical nonsense again. Anywho, those dinky cool houses and that beach, that's where I spend all my summers as a kid. If you've never been to Nida, and chances are you haven't because it's not easy to get to, wonderful beaches, barely any people, amazing food, really warm in summer too. Basically, perfect swimming weather. That's what I like to reminisce about. Those creative moments, or ridiculous moments. The time we improvised and shot an actual short film for the Meeple Circus review. I'm not gonna say it was a good film, but we did it. The time I painted my face blue for the Sidereal Confluence video. The time we reviewed Anachrony, a game about time travel, and glitched a clip from a video we would only publish months later. And of course, nobody noticed that we did that. But even our second video had an opening sketch that, at least in my opinion, stands up to this day.
Get this free parker pen just for inquiring.
Oh, it's really neat. Can you write with it?
Yes.
Can you fill out a check with it?
Yes.
Can you like write down a tax form?
Yes.
And can you write letters with it?
Yes.
No, I don't want it.
That's just funny. But the unscripted bits with rambly, unpracticed dialogue, awkward repetition, and unnecessary superlatives, honestly, I can't watch that. And if you've been watching NPI back then and still do so now, thank you for putting up with all of that. I hope that we're paying off. And you know, I made fun of myself for not knowing the technical stuff, and that's okay, I'm allowed to make fun of myself. But I don't think that matters, because that's not what sticks out. I remember the skits and the creativity fondly. I remember the pacing and structure with a wedge of cringe lodged into my sternum. And yet I have almost no memory of not knowing how to do things, but over the years I have learned a lot and I'm very proud of that. So if you want to start doing something in your life you've never done before, YouTube videos or whatever, my advice would be, don't be afraid to try. Time will look kindly on that. I'd say the start of the second period would be somewhere onwards from the Terraforming Mars video. That's where we finally begun working to understand pacing and structure. We were already writing scripts for our videos for a while, and we got an actual camera instead of a potato because people gave us money on Kickstarter, but now we really started thinking about how to actually craft a review that doesn't just share our opinions, but informs the audience. And the gags were still alright. Especially when you turn a dial and it produces a result. Not every video is a winner, but at least I'm happy enough with them to keep them all published and easily accessible on the channel. Even the Orbis review, which is a very weird video because I didn't like that game nowhere near as much as my delivery in the beginning implies, because what I thought I would do was I would just ramp it up with hyperbolized hype and then become progressively more and more dismissive of it. Could have worked if I was much better at crafting something clever like that, but now it just comes across as disjointed. This is again the time when I finally figure out white balance, and just because I learned how to use it does not mean I used it well. There's a number of videos in a row that just look very blue for no good reason. And now you know the reason, which is basically me just thinking, what if we made them blue? And then I got an email from a fellow reviewer who said, really enjoyed your last few videos, but something's wrong with your white balance. You might want to check that out. And I immediately stopped because I was so embarrassed. So here's a tip if you're starting out. Don't make your videos blue for no reason. On the other hand, we made such gems as the root review, which I think is very strong and has my favorite opening for any video we've ever done. Other favorites include the pipeline review and now boarding review, both of which also contain a song and have far less views than they deserve. If you missed out on those, they're very entertaining videos. I think the now boarding video could be paced a little better in places, but both are deserving of your attention. Which leaves us with the last third period of MPI, the pandemic years. It could also be called the Nottingham period, because up until today, they're almost perfectly overlapping. I have to admit that despite really enjoying working on NPI, I wasn't very happy. NPI wasn't making enough money for either of us, so I worked odd part-time jobs, mentioned the light bulb salesmanship. I also worked at a comic book shop, that was pretty cool. Elaine was working full-time at the library, which is a much harder job than you would think. Libraries were and continue to be progressively understaffed and underfunded. Thanks, Tories. It's a stressful job. Lots of people that work there just up and leave because they don't want to deal with it anymore. And hiring new people and training them doesn't happen anywhere near fast enough. So those who remain just have to pick up their work. And then after work, we had to make these videos. Elaine was exhausted, which in turn made me exhausted. And we were living in the tiniest apartment outside of London with all that camera gear and all those board games and a neighbor who was often drunk and violent. We also could only afford something that was very remote, so it was pretty much living in the countryside, which made me feel very socially isolated. Through sheer stroke of luck, we ended up with this house in Nottingham, and our Patreon campaign started off really well, which meant that Elaine could finally quit her job. It relieved an enormous amount of pressure. And so to anyone who backed us on day one or are backing us now, thank you so much. I know I say this all the time, but without you, this wouldn't be possible. Thank you. Thank you. I was really looking forward to living in Nottingham because it is actually a city as opposed to living next to some cows, and the only cows I want in my life are in Great Western Trail. I would finally be afforded a little bit more social mobility. And then the pandemic hit, which, as you know, has been swell. So we just kept working. I'm very happy with where we are at now, video-wise. We started experimenting a lot more with the types of videos we make. The Food Chain Magnet and Fort videos were us experimenting with a more essayistic approach, and I think those are pretty good. But obviously then we made the Colonialism in Board Games and Sleeping Gods videos, and those were really well received. I'm looking forward to doing more of that. My favorite in that line of videos is the one we did on Kanban, which of course has the least views. It's just the way it goes. This is where we begin to tap into what really excites me about making videos about board games and why I keep doing them. Having gone all over that, I think has given me enough space to ease in one final admission. I got into this for the wrong reasons. All the way back in 2013, tabletop games were all that I could think about. I was literally hyped by any announcement. Any board game publisher announcing anything was immediately the best news. Cry Havoc? More like cried right onto my table. Here's my money and all of that. I did end up panning Cry Havoc quite hard. And actually, as a total aside, we get a lot of flack when we've had a board game. But looking back on it, where's that game now? Huh? Here's some games that we did not like and got a lot of pushback after publishing the review. March of the Ants. Ever heard of March of the Ants? Me neither. Literally couldn't tell you anything about it despite having reviewed it. Gen 7. Remember Gen 7? Yes, because you bought it in the discount bin for $15, which is where it lives now, together with Discover, Lands Unknown. Turns out, Lands Unknown was just a funny way of saying recycling center. I know some people still enjoy Rising Sun, but I'd argue that that game is nowhere near as popular as its predecessor Blood Rage, and also nowhere near as good as its post-decessor Ankh, a game we'll cover on this channel very soon. Anyway, as fun as it is to say, hey, most of the time we were right, ultimately it doesn't really matter. People make mistakes. And sometimes we did too. I got into this because I was really excited to talk about board games, and I thought, hey, what if I share my opinions on board games on the internet? That was stupid. It gets kind of weird talking about this because people do watch us for our opinions and value them. Even if they disagree, they're working from a familiar, established base, and that's a helpful guideline. And that's what I failed to realize. I'm not here to share my opinion, I'm here to help. So when I say that sharing my opinions about board games is stupid, what I mean isn't that I'm purposefully going out of my way not to share them, is that my intent for sharing them shapes how useful these videos are to you. I think the work that led from that realization made me a lot more proud of it and more careful in how we make videos, and naturally led me to make videos like the Sleeping Gods one or the Colonialism one. A few years ago, the phrase Golden Age of Board Games was bandied around a lot because this industry was experiencing ridiculous growth. And sure, board games are old, they're older than most things actually, but I think that that phrase is daft because whilst board games are old, the board games that we play today and the way we play them now are pretty much in their infancy. I think it would be more accurate to say that board games of yesteryear are the parents to our board games and our board games are toddlers. And some people will say to the toddlers, these are your golden years, enjoy them while you can, to which the toddler will obviously respond, Agooga! But pragmatically, we're just scratching the surface here. And the way we talk about games, well, we're just scratching the surface here too. That's what keeps me going. I want to scratch that surface and see what hides underneath. I want to be a part of this exploration about what conversations we can have via the medium of a physical play space. I want to highlight context and maybe sometimes even give it a nudge in a different direction. I want to be here. And hopefully 20 years down the line, if board games are still a thing, maybe someone will say, hey, remember that video about that game? That was good. I'm making this all sound very lofty and ostentatious for a YouTuber. Not every video can be incisive and revelatory, unless you're H-Bomber guy, or Noah Gervais. But I don't mind just reviewing board games too. Take the Too Many Bones video, for example, which, you know, playing Too Many Bones so many times was obviously hard work, but not as hard as playing all those games and simultaneously knowing that that video will mostly appeal to Too Many Bones fans. Yet what they'll want is unilateral adoration. Yet unilateral adoration isn't actually helpful. What's helpful is if I weigh up each individual piece of it and also all of it together as a whole. That kind of work needs love behind it. And yes, I've neglected to commit the L word to board games. That's just because they're physical things. I think we as people who collect these boxes, we sometimes get too attached to them because we think they'll carry on our legacy and tell our stories, whereas they're just as impermanent as we are. I care about the experiences that board games create and being a part of it. That's what I love. This video is sponsored by Skillshare, the best online community for learning new things. Skillshare is your gateway on a journey to discovering something new in your life. It's great on brushing up on a particular skill like photography or cooking or interior design. And it's also a great place to just browse and maybe find something that inspires you. I've talked a lot about pacing and structure in today's video and identified them as one of the most important elements in my work. And you might have thought to yourself, gee, where do I learn some pacing and structure? Because I could use it in whatever it is that I'm doing. Where do I learn? Easy. On Skillshare, I found a class called How to Speak Confidently on Camera, a guide for content creators by Nathaniel Drew. It teaches you how to connect ideas, how to incorporate scripting into your work, how you can employ editing to paste over mistakes or awkward bits, and even how to deal with criticism. If I had Skillshare when I started out, maybe it wouldn't have taken me years to get there. There's even a class on white balancing too. Now you might say, that sounds like a very specific class for a niche situation. Yes, you know how I found that class? I wrote the script, thought to myself, you know what would be a great fit for the Skillshare sponsor spot? A class on pacing and structure. So I put that in the search bar and voila, there it was. And you can find anything that bothers or interests you in your life. And the best news yet is that Skillshare is free for a month. If you use the link in the description, you will get a 1 month free trial of Skillshare. You can also do that during checkout by putting in the code, no pun included, all one word. If you do that, that's gonna help us out, by the way.